on, you bastard!
The following is, in essence, a continuation of the concepts discussed in episode 160, Blokees Bonanza. As such, certain elements such as general sizing, articulation, and assembly will be glossed over to save time, as they have already been covered in the prior entry. For more deets, go back and watch that one. Oh, and also review copies, in part, provided by Blokees. With that said, as per usual, all opinions contained within the video are my own. I can't be bought out. I'ma say whatever the f*** I want. That just happens to be absurdly positive this time. To stylize or not to stylize? That is the question. This past while, Blokees has found insane success in carving out a space for themselves within the fandom. It's all very carefully crafted, slotting into a niche that Hasbro is distancing themselves from, using carefully applied parts reuse to keep the costs down, making sure they're dense. It's no accident that they became as popular as they did. The entire concept is tailor-made for Transformers, though they are definitely expanding. If I hear anyone insulting Sesame Street, well, let's just say...
Start running.
However, as much as those factors are at play, stylization cannot be understated. The Blokees aesthetic was carefully chosen, a wonderful middle ground between super deformed and traditional robots. The proof is in the pudding. Plenty of people who would never buy super deformed characters are grabbing these in droves. However, what happens when you slowly start to move away from that? Transformers 1 has proven a massive success within the community. The box office sadly leaves a lot to be desired, no thanks to the abysmal marketing, but Transformers fans are eating up the thing faster than a pack of donuts in the office. Problem is, the merchandise hasn't really capitalized on this. We have a few deluxes, a couple of waves of gimmick toys, and 2 Studio Series figures. Compared to Rise of the Beasts, it's honestly really lacking. There's only been one consistent output in regards to this film, one facet that's been going full speed ahead for the whole thing. Blokees. But here's the thing, Transformers 1 already has its own specific style. Blokees also has a very specific style, or head-to-torso ratio, and Transformers 1, abiding by the traditional proportional choice of most 3D animated movies, kinda already fits into that. Thing is, when you lose the style you've built up, is that a blessing or a curse? Will a greater adherence to the screen model be a boon for their popularity, or will they lose what made the company so special in the first place? Greetings, Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis brings us back to the wonderful world of Blokees. Yeah, I didn't expect to make one of these so soon, but I was kind of on a roll with the last video, and then on top of that, one of the videos I had for this marathon had to be canned because Glide broke, and the replacement won't arrive in time, so I had to shove in something else at the last minute. Shit happens, we gotta do what we gotta do, and to be honest, I think my head is in a better space to write this sort of script at this specific time. Anyway, I don't have any fancy intros or explanations on what Blokees are, or how they came to be, or who is your daddy and what does he do. The answer is teaching and his students, by the way. You can go back and watch the original video for a rundown of how all this shit works. I think it's best we just raw dog right into this. Here we go! Yeah, we're sort of shuffling things around in release order for this one, because literally as I was finishing the filming for episode 160, I just came across this wave of King's comics. They were adamant they were skipping this one too, but apparently not. So I did what I usually do and jumped at the chance. The assortment I ended up with was considerably more low-key than what I've covered so far, mostly because these figures are much earlier in the company's Transformers life cycle. Like Shattered Glass Optimus Prime. He's fine, I guess. But out of the 4, I think he might be my least favorite Primer-like. Now, a lot of this does come down to me. My preference on SG Primes is them leaning more to the bluer side of purple rather than the redder, duller one, which isn't exactly accurate to the character. Chalk it up to my preference of Eva Convoy, but it's just what I like. And it's why I gravitated towards the Earthrise Selects one so well. And this Prime is more accurate, so it doesn't particularly do much for me. I can't call it bad by any means, though. It's categorically a well-crafted release. The paintwork is crisp, the tamper graphing is probably the best of the 4, especially with the forearm arrows. The green-grey head crest is resplendent, the waist section is gorgeous. There are plenty of things about this figure that I can recognize are done insanely well. To call this bad is just wrong. It's a good Blokee. It just isn't something that's particularly up my alley. Functionally, I'd probably call it the second best of the 4, right under Nemesis Prime, but personally, it's just my least favorites. And that's okay. Not everyone has to vibe with every single design. Lord knows there's been things I bought that I thought were good, but just not for me, time and time again. Of course, the universe hates me for some reason, so this is the one I ended up getting duplicates of. Twice the pride, double the selling off. Coming soon to an eBay page near you. Side note, please don't ask me to sell my figures in the comments. It always leads to frustrations. I'll sell them as I choose. And it's not like this wave didn't get anything for me either. I mean, I got got pretty lucky with long haul. Would have liked both Constructicons from the set, but hey, tracking down 2 more instead of 3 is still a positive. With that said, I do think is ultimately the weakest of the 4 I've covered so far. I'd still put him above everything else I've gotten in this wave from a personal standpoint, but he definitely feels slightly like a downgrade. The sculpting is really nice, especially with the head and chest. They've managed to capture the roundness whilst still having the panel on the back. It's a wonderful blend of toon and toy, and with the sharp sculpt, it looks mean as fuck. The torso also has lots of greebling lines, and hypothetically, it could look very cool. It's just a shame that unfortunately it's missing a lot of color, as I can't imagine it's very easy to add silver and gunmetal to the front without liberal use of paints. And that's really the main issue overall, there's just not a lot of color breakup. There's not much room to fit in the tampergraphs. And given this is the second wave, they haven't really begun to experiment with proper paints like they did in later waves. Even the midriff sort of seems like it's separate from the rest of the design. There's not as much clever integration with the rest. At least we got the inner purple frame though. I guess the biggest thing is I wish they'd done something more creative with the legs. They just sort of exist. I know it's not possible to really do the inverted bucket leg look on the traditional Blokees skeleton, but something else would have been nice. I still like him though. I guess the Constructicons have the touch and the power with their color scheme. And there are things I find really neat, such as the extra paint on the pipe section, the awesome bucket hoodie, the hand replacements, which would be really nice to see on some of the other third-party versions. And again, the head sculpt. I cannot stress enough that I love this head sculpt. It's just a little difficult to point out everything I do like, as it's already been discussed at length in relation to the other members covered in the last video. But above all else, it's just another great member in the lineup. Even if it categorically is the weakest. There's just something special about seeing the 4 of them all lined up, and fuck me dead, I want to get the last 2 so bad. While Long Haul is my favorite though, the best would easily have to be Starscream. If any Blockee could be described as serving this would hold that distinction extremely. I mean, just look at his face, shit-eating grin and eyeshadow and all. It's good to see they've started fixing some of the head sculpts as early as the second wave, as although it's still a bit squished, it's way better than the first few outings. It also uses the tampergraph stylings really well, especially with the midriff. That's such a good optical illusion. From most angles, it actually looks like a proper indent. The arms and legs are pretty par for the course, but the shoulders do really well with the added null rays. I was half expecting them to just plonk them onto the sides of the wrists, not that such would be bad, I do that with my favorite Seeker mold of all time. But no, they actually remolded the shoulders. That's really commendable, as is the inclusion of the most famous Target Master of all time. Funny how the stock has to be sideways to fit under the forearm though. Lol, and I must say, Lamau. The null ray thing does mean that they end up covering the wings, which have some really lovely detail on them, but they still go hard with their dedicated tampergraphing. See, this is the kind of paint detail that Long Haul should have had. Come on! Will say though, I do find it funny that the $10 Blockee is able to do the wings infinitely better than the $90 reissue from the retro line. Toon accurate, my ass. This is just inexcusable. The last traditional release I received from this wave was Cliffjumper, and honestly, I don't have a lot to say about him. The mechanical detail is pretty standard, the tampergraphing is pretty minimalist, my only enjoyment from him is that the head is kinda cool, I guess. I realize the Penny Racer mini-bots were pretty simplistic designs overall, but especially going into a style like this, I don't particularly get much from it. It's not bad, but I'm finding it really difficult to find anything to write about him. So I guess that leaves us the weirdo of the group, Grimlock. And you know what? I think I actually get it now. Grimlock is designed very much in the same way as Snarl was. Although I guess it would be more accurate to say Snarl is designed in the same way as Grimlock, as this was the first wave to give us Dinobots. And yeah, things make a lot more sense now. The way the parts all click together, the way they rearrange themselves, now it actually feels like they have a clear idea going on. With Snarl, it sort of felt like they were pushing the style to its absolute limits, and less in a creative way, more like they hit a roadblock, but with Grimlock, it feels more inspired. I can see the oversized head Blockee styling's peeking through a lot more, and he looks very adorable for it. The mechanical detail sort of reminds me of Warpaint, and he ends up looking like a toddler playing armies on the playground as a result. He adorable. The tampergraphing is minimalist, but unlike Cliffjumper, it doesn't really matter that much with how the color breakup works. The grey and yellow combo works very well. I love how they kept the tampergraphing on the torso, even though it's really low down and barely anyone can see it. It's nice to know they went to the trouble of making it look like it transforms, even if it actually doesn't. Articulation is pretty alright. It feels like a lot more than the Studio Series version, when in reality it's pretty much the same. I just wish the tail had more, as there's joints in there that allow for rotation at the back. The problem is, it locks in place with this protrusion, so even though it's literally using a hold that would typically become the waist swivel, it forces itself to remain stationary. Hardly anything to get too fussed over though. Really, he a cutie. I'd even go as far as saying more so than my proper Legends Grimlocks in my collection. He's not the best Blockee I own, but unlike Snarl, I actually feel something from this one. I actually have a desire to keep this one around. It's just unfortunate that this one was also a duplicate in my purchases. Wait, hang on, that's not unfortunate at all.
Pretty, shiny,
shiny.
Through my own sheer dumb luck and not through anything provided by Blokees themselves, I somehow ended up with the chase version of this fine fellow. I just grabbed an extra box on the way to a memorial service on the 20th of last month and he was just there. God damn, I know I tend to be very lucky, but it still blindsides me. Yeah, this is pretty much just the previous Grimlock with a metallic coat. There are extra accessories he comes with, and they are kinda neat, but honestly, if you want a metallic Grimlock, you could probably cover off the tamper-graphed pieces with masking tape and give it a spray. Though, I suppose part of the charm is having the chase version for the rarity, and it does look lovely. The silver is some of the loveliest I've seen on a figure recently, and the gold is almost on the level of chrome. Whatever they're using on this thing looks lovely. It also has the side effect of making the mechanical detail look infinitely crisper. I'm noticing stuff like the cross pattern on the legs way more, or the rivets on the hands and collar. Hell, the war paint grooves make him look actually menacing now instead of cute and cuddly. There's also red on the inner frame, which looks loveliest of all, but you can barely see it with everything else covering it up. Would have loved this stuff to be more visible, but at the end of the day, he is a Grimlock, and as such, he has to follow a preset character design. Speaking of the red though, the eyes are a different color. This may bother some people, but personally, I'm fine with either. I think this is the Dinobot I'm going to keep around. The regular one is great and all, but it just has nothing on this. The only thing that would make this perfect is a clear neck piece, though that's always been a personal preference of mine. And I don't think it's feasible with these sorts of model kits. There haven't been many clear Blokees sets they've done, and when they do, it's usually a convention exclusive or some shit. Either way, to steal another YouTuber's catchphrase, shiny thing good.
Stop stealing my shit!
Sorry.
You better be!
Here are some examples of scrunklies.
I suppose they couldn't stick with making standard robots forever. It's a new movie, so of course they're going to be roped into advertising for it. It just makes marketing sense. They've actually overhauled the entire design system to make them work. You've got a bunch of new frame pieces, such as redesigned thighs, new standardized feet, angular waist pieces to fit into the movie stylization, and even new pre-assembled elbow and knee joints. Not only are these far more sturdy, but you don't have to worry about chipping your nail or some shit putting these tiny pieces together. Other than that though, the assembly is pretty similar to what's come before. Now, for the Galaxy class lineup, you can pretty easily split them into two key groups. You got the downscales of the transforming robots from the films, and, more importantly, you've got the cogless bots. One thing you'll notice from the film is that those without transformation cogs are given very specific stylizations. Weak-ass limbs and bigger heads. They're very child-coded, and many media analyzers have made comparisons to Sentinel's rule and child labor, so it likely does serve a narrative purpose. Point is, though, Blokees has a very specific style it typically goes for, and that style is pretty much the same. These don't feel like Blokees doing a stylized take on cogless bots. They just feel like the cogless bots. Coupled with the fact that they're basically perfectly scaled with Studio Series Deluxes purely by accident, and you have the greatest unintentional success you could imagine. Of course, most of them are fairly simple design-wise. Cyanide and Hound are pretty much the same thing with different heads, right down to the shared accessories. They all get the excavation gun because they're striking a chord. Wait, no, that's the wrong spelling of minor. The sculpting we do have is quite nice though. I love the way the torso folds around the cog cavity, using multiple pieces to do so. They're able to do this by reallocating the piece count for what would normally be the backpack, and I think that's really neat. And much like the better Constructicons, they use the inner torso with tamper-graphs to create some really cool layering effects. Also love the leg detailing. Not sure how to describe it, it just looks really nice. Wheeljack's also pretty neat, and he does go a lot harder on his unique parts. He feels really different compared to the others, as most of his armor has been overhauled. The head is alright, though I'm not that partial to it over the more classic design, though I suspect that's a me thing. The legs are done very well, perhaps too well. They've got so much paint and tamper-graphs on show that it kinda distracts you from everything else. Like the shaping and other details are really cool, but it's a smidge difficult to notice it all. There's subtle stuff like the midriff section that sorta looks like it came right out of the Behold Galvatron scene, and I love how they gave him his ranking badge on his collar, but it's a little hard to notice with how crazy everything is waist down. But hey, first world problems, right? Weirdly enough, I think Bumblebee might be the weakest of the wave. There's a real cheapness to his plastic that I haven't really experienced with the other figures. Even the worst ones from the last video. He's got an entirely new assembly for the feet, but they just end up looking too big, kinda like clown shoes. The face sculpt kinda looks weird. Blokees has mostly fixed their weird head issues since Wave 3 onwards, but this seems almost a return to that style. I think it might be the lips or maybe the dead eyes, but he kinda looks like one of those aliens from Steven Spielberg's AI, Artificial Intelligence. Spoiler alert for a 2-decade-old movie, I guess. And that torso, just no. It's as if they were putting black panel lining directly onto yellow, which is already a big mistake, but then it's not even following the existing details, so it ends up looking even worse. I know as an amateur gunplay— No, Microsoft Word, it's putting gunplay in there. No, Microsoft Word, I never mean gunplay, I mean gunpla, you idiots. I know as an amateur gunpla builder, I've made that coloring mistake many times, but after seeing this, I'm probably deterred forever. I will say though, it's kind of funny that as I was making this video, Toy Hacks literally announced a set for the cogless bots, and it does make Bumblebee look a lot better, but I'm not sure I'm really gonna bother because, you know, rule of upgrading figures you like, not fixing figures you don't. I don't know, I'm 50-50 on it. At least Orion looks good. He probably has the most tamper graphing out of all of this wave. The torso just keeps going and going and going, and it turns out really well with the bronze highlights. Shame they skipped the rank badge though, slight missed opportunity. At least it makes up for it though with a really cool black outlining around the chest. I think this is what they were going for with Bumblebee, it just didn't quite come across right. Really, my main criticism is the face. It's fine, but it's a little elongated. From certain angles, it looks like Woody from Toy Story, the actual Woody, not that weird creepy meme out of Japan back in 2010. He's actually got a friend in you, it's not a euphemism. But aside from that, they're pretty good, ignoring Bumblebee. They serve a really neat function and offer the same level of playability the other Galaxy class figures have. Rumor has it we're supposed to be getting another wave of these, and I hope we do because they make really nice companion pieces. Unfortunately, this only accounts for half the wave. The other half... Look, I get it, but at the same time, I just don't get it. Optimus Prime, Megatron, Steve, and Sentinel Prime are, in essence, Blokeeified versions of the main cast. Yes, Steve included. We love him. Thing is, I don't particularly think it works for most of them. Prime is easily the best with his lovely face sculpt, awesome Matrix. Hell is with Microsoft Word at the moment. I just want to write this. Awesome Matrix tamper graph, fantastic accessories, and swish vibe. He even has a metallic finish on the smokestacks, thighs, and forearms, and this isn't the chase version. This is right out of the normal box, and he still looks resplendent. I guess it makes sense that they put the most effort into this one, but here's the thing. I'm just not feeling the cute factor with this. Since Blokees doesn't have full control over the aesthetic like they normally do, it just feels like a semi-chibi version of something vaguely familiar instead of a proper ground-up intentional design. And that's the best of the bunch. The others take it even further down. Megatron looks fine and all, but he's lacking a lot of that tamper graph brilliance I've seen with the other ones. And I have to wonder, why isn't this D16? Are they saving that version for a later wave? Instead we get this sort of middle ground Megatron that a lot of people don't tend to associate with the character. Nice that they included the decal, wonky positioning and all, but it feels like the rest of the design misses out on a lot of key tamper graphing that made me love the first few waves. It's fine, but there's just not a lot to say about him other than the weapon storage. Yes, you may notice they've made a change to the forearms. The weapons now all have to be underslung, and I don't like it. It doesn't affect most of the bots, but when it does, it makes posing really difficult. This cannon is pretty cool, but Megatron just can't use it properly. Steve suffers arguably even more, where his wrist-mounted blasters blend in with everything else. Not that he needs any help, he's pretty bloody bland as is. From what little we've seen of the trackers in the film, they actually have some subtle differentiation between the inner frame and the outer armor. Differentiation completely lost with this rendition. There's a lot of detail here, but I can't really see any of it. I want a closer look at that layering on the torso, but the camera can't even focus on it. What am I to do? There's also the feeling that he's trying to break out of his own price point. A lot of parts, like the gun and the backpack, just feel hollow and undercooked. The wings feel like they should be a lot more sturdy, but they end up being really thin and waffled. That feeling feels a lot stronger with Sentinel, though. He is just begging to be freed of this price point. The plastic and paint are the best out of the wave, with the metallic blue and the resplendent gold decorating the whole thing. You get extra paint on the swords, which they could have easily skipped, and even dedicated kneecap pieces. Like, this is a Legion-priced figure. Damn! I acknowledge the effort put in here. I acknowledge that they wanted to go all out at this price point. But that price point really feels like it's holding this design back. Again, with this particular aesthetic, it doesn't really mesh with the Blokees' proportional stylings. The head looks out of place, the shoulders too small, the torso too squished. It's so close to feeling purposeful, yet it just falls flat. The wings feel truncated. They're so luscious in their gold and crisp detailing. But what good is all of that when you can barely see them from behind the rest of the body? Sentinel Prime is a regal thing that flourishes in figures that are able to go all out. Something both mainline versions seem to have issues with. The idea behind this toy is fundamentally opposed to that. I think it's commendable giving people an affordable Sentinel for your desk, but I don't think this was the way to go about it. Given the stylization concessions, Blokees' Galaxy lineup is far better suited to the cogless than these four. I'm not even sure I'll keep them around after this. They're not bad, don't get me wrong, but they're stuck between two worlds, and setting them free does a lot better.
Thank you for my pornography.
See what I mean? See how far they're able to go when they're free from restrictions? Sentinel Prime was the first of the four I built, and despite being the weakest, he's still pretty good. The head sculpt is pretty much on the money. Maybe it's a little squished, but it's leagues above Bumblebee in the Galaxy Wave. I love the metallic plastic and paint they use to pick out all the specific deets. It just hits right in the way the Chug versions haven't. In fact, the cool thing about all of these is that they have truly gorgeous metallic finishes. This is exactly what I wanted from the Studio Series versions. Optimus Prime played with the idea, but the rest sorta gave up, and it's a real shame. If Bayverse cars can do metallic finishes whilst still paying licensing fees, I don't see why the one cast can't do the same. Doubly so when again, these kits all sit around the deluxe price point. Blokees can do it. What's your excuse? I love the layering effects he's got all around his body. These kits do really well building armor on top of armor on top of armor, and this is no exception. I never actually realized so many of the screen model details works this way. It's really opened my eyes to the subtleties ILM included. Even the back goes hard, which in the context of Blokees makes sense, but then you take a step back and it's insane. And the wings. This is what the wings needed to be. Wilder, this is one of the few cases that shows how resplendent they are. Like, I enjoy the mainline one, but it just doesn't hit the same. And why isn't the Studio Series one metallic? Like, what the f***? Of course, the accessory game is pretty cool, with the dual blades that... Wait, was this a Dark of the Moon reference this whole time? Holy sh**! You also have a bunch of alternate parts to mimic his powering up in the final act of the movie, and... Motherfucker. What the hell? The side of his head just snapped clean off. I didn't even bang it or anything. It just kind of snapped off. It just fell the f*** off. I don't even know what to do with that. Okay, that is a bit of an issue. How thin is that? That is really thin and wibbly. Jesus Christ, I did not expect that to happen. I'm not going to put the mask on because that does seem like a bit of an issue. I think the feet feel a bit unfinished. I've never been a big fan of the design, but overall, I think it's a nice display feature. And speaking of nice display features, I genuinely love the bases they come with. The previous three also had them, but I never really talked about them as they were just sorta there. Here, with the crystalline surroundings, these go hard. It does have a bit of jank under the hood though. There's things here that definitely could have been improved. The hands kinda look ugly, as part of needing to allow the sword to fit in. I think these could have been designed a lot better. Maybe with the gun- Are you kidding me? Damn it, Microsoft words! I think these could have been designed a lot better. Maybe with a Gunpla style removable fist cover or a Studio Series style split on the blades themselves. Maybe they couldn't fit it in the parts count budget, but I'm not sure some of these alternate parts were that necessary anyway. Secondly, the wings love to pop off. They're still using those clear plastic ball joints, which to this day I wish they'd move away from. They also don't really hold onto the ball joint cuts that well. It might be that the finish on the wings isn't playing nice with the tolerances, but they're very loose as is. And I'm not sure how to fix it without potentially causing breakage issues. The arms also have this really cool new joint system that doesn't quite work. For the most part, the articulation is identical to previous classic class figures, but now because of these shoulder pads, they've added these new outward shoulder hinges. They almost work, but this causes a really bad cut in the sculpt with how low it is. I think just having the shoulder armor be a separate piece would have worked better here, or at least putting a cut higher, which is actually what Megatron ended up doing to a much more successful effect. And finally, the proportions are really goofy. The head is really sunken into the torso, making him look hunchbacked. The torso is better than the Galaxy class version, but it almost looks overweight with the extra bulk below the pecs. And by God, why are his thighs so short? I get that the joint's tucked in there, but there had to be a better way to hide it instead of shifting the panels up. This is far from a bad figure. There's a lot to love here. It's just got a few blemishes here and there that aren't present on the other figures. Though arguably, those blemishes do make him more interesting. The leader one is all around a far more solid figure, but consequently, there isn't a lot to say about her. In essence, she looks like she walked straight off the screen, metallic finish and all. Said finish doesn't quite go as hard as Sentinel or Megatron, likely because the fuchsia plastic doesn't work as well with the finish, but proportionally and aesthetically, I basically have no notes. Perfect sculpting, perfect color breakup that I never noticed in the film, brilliant head sculpt, even if the eyes stare into your soul. She's a figure I unironically find myself posing randomly on time off. Not that I have time off this month because... The gun she comes with is a smidge oversized, probably because it was designed for Optimus Prime and reused for her, basically unchanged. But I guess that's lore accurate, so I don't really see an issue with that. Really, my one complaint is that the fist guards never stay on straight. That's it. That's my one complaint. Fantastic figure all around. Just not fantastic in an interesting way. I wish I had more to say. Sort of the same with Megatron. Great figure, but not something I can really point out as worthy of note. Fantastic head sculpts, great proportions, awesome metallic finish. Seriously, this coat of paint is really what makes these figures, and it really highlights what was missing from the Chug outings. You also finally get to see how the cutout shoulders work when they're done properly, since they now line up with the sockets themselves. Looks funny with the tiny gun on his left arm, though. Funny in a ha-ha, goofy-ah way, not a bad way. Honestly, I'm kind kinda surprised that there aren't that many red pieces included in the builds. In retrospect, it makes sense, it's just not a character design that would need it, but when assembling it, yeah, it is a bit weird. The red does bring the posing to life though. These all share very similar posing amounts, same as the last three, hence why I haven't gone into detail, and it all works exceptionally well. You even get extra flaps above the feet to allow more movement below. This guy is really easy to pose. Getting him into something badass is effortless. Gripes are really minor with him. Again, not that type of minor. Basically, the fists are too big and the gun is too small. That's it. Boo Ooh, such horrible things to be frustrated over. Wah. Am I wrong in saying this is probably the best representation of this character design? I mean, there isn't much competition. Mainline doesn't have one. Studio Series looks fine, and YOLO Park, okay, honestly, I don't actually know. Basically, he's the best, and not just by default. He'll likely remain that way unless Takara makes one of their commander-ish leaders to go with their prime, which sadly probably won't happen. But I can still dream. But from the outset, he just oozes the character from the film. He makes a statement on your desk, even in a standard pose, and that's really amazing. You even get hidden cog detail by removing the chest. That's pretty cool, and I wish Sentinel Prime did the same thing, though given the complexity of his torso, I sort of see why they didn't. Though, history seems to be repeating itself from the last video, because Optimus Prime easily takes the cake here. And it's a rich chocolate mud cake with perfect icing, because this motherfucker is sexy. The amount of shine on this thing is insane. You'd be forgiven for thinking this thing is sort of like a Chase version if you'd never handled the Chase figure before. Fortunately, they're not pulling an MMC with this. Though, it does actually carry over the axe fading from the Galaxy class Chase version, which I think is pretty neat. I'm afraid the ball joints aren't compatible though, for those wanting to swap. Also, again, he weirdly doesn't use a lot of red pieces, which is insane because the red on show is amazing. Sometimes less is more, I guess. The head sculpt is right on the money, though you can definitely see the big head style a bit more on these. The Transformers 1 character designs sort of naturally have bigger heads than most series aesthetics, so it translated very well in the last three, but here you can tell it's Blokees. The eyes shine wonderfully though, and even the Matrix lights up, which is awesome. The torso also opens up to give us a closer look, though unfortunately for some it isn't removable. I'm fine with it though. To be honest, I've been getting sick of constant matrices. They're accurate, sure, but when every Prime has them, they kinda lose their luster. The gun actually looks properly proportioned now, which makes sense as it was probably made specifically for this design. And he's finally a figure that just works without any fist issues, when you basically end up only using one because of the axe. Oh, the irony. I think the legs might actually be my favorite part though. The layering is insane. Combining the lovely blue from Sentinel, then the awesome silver from Megatron, and finally the divine dirty metal from the Galaxy class version. Yeah, this might be the best thing from this entire video. I genuinely thought it was going to be absurdly difficult to give us something better than 07 Prime. That was just something else. F me dead. This is some next level shit. But I guess that brings us back to the original question. What happens when Blokees is forced to relinquish control of their stylization? How do the toys fare? Well, keep in mind, some of the toys don't do too well even with that stylization incorporated. But for the ones that do fail because of the conundrum, it does feel like they're fighting an uphill battle. And I think the large figures are able to navigate that space a lot more effectively, partly because they have more room to breathe, but partly because Transformers 1 designs are very similar to what Blokees already does. There are instances where this works really well, and instances where they feel really constricted. It just really depends on the circumstance, but I guess it boils down to trust a company that has done a lot of good to continue to do a lot of good, unless the writing on the wall says otherwise. So far it hasn't, outside of some probable interns copy-pasting bios from TF Wiki instead of writing their own bios. But I honestly think that was a genuine mistake, and it'll probably be ironed out by the next few releases. Part of the initial charm of the first set has certainly worn off, but these are still doing great things in the non-transforming Transformers paradigm. I still think they should return to the style they know best, or at least do more cogless figures, but whatever path they choose, I'm sure it'll do well. Just give us Devastator. Come on, please, I'm begging you. But as always, Phantom Public Consciousness is a conversation, so drop your thoughts on the continuation of Blokees below. Do you think this new direction is sustainable? Do you find enjoyment in these adorable bastards at all? Once again, big thanks to Blokees for supplying me with the Transformers 1 stuff. It's not something I really had my eye on, but I've honestly been blown away by it. Anywho, with that said, enough talking about non-transforming Transformers. Let's get back to some transforming Transformers. For those not aware, this video is part of the 5th season of the Legendary Marathon, a celebratory month of all things small scale. 6 full-length reviews, 25 mini-reviews. Tomorrow we're going back to the smaller things and discussing 2 of the most tangential and out-of-place core class figures Studio Series have ever done. Why do these exist? And why are they so good? But until then, as always, remember, there's a context for everything. Till next time!